Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are around the globe. My name is Pınar Keskin-Ocak. I'm a professor in the School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at Georgia Tech and the director of the Center for Health and Humanitarian Systems. And I'm also one of the conference co-chairs. Together with my colleagues with this one, I'm hoping you see my screen. We would like to welcome you to the 12th annual Health and Humanitarian Logistics Conference on behalf of all the co-chairs and the organizers. So let's see if I can advance my slide. So year after year, we organize this conference as we continue to face growing challenges in meeting fundamental human needs and also responding to emergencies. Healthcare, of course, is on the forefront for many countries. It has been for a long time, especially this year, with a wide range of focus areas, including childhood survival, communicable and non-communicable diseases, nutrition, and many others. So critical health emergencies such as Zika, Ebola, and of course now COVID, as well as natural and man-made disasters have impacted numerous communities around the world. So as we are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, it continues to bring unique challenges to all of us around the world. And the negative effects of such emergencies are often disproportionately high on low-income or vulnerable populations. In addition to the immediate impact these emergencies cause, they also complicate ongoing development needs in health, nutrition, education, as well as many other key areas. So that's basically what we hope to address a little bit in this conference. Whether we face an emergency or a long-term development challenge, there are often many actors who play a role. Many of you are active in these spaces. We have limited resources, and we also face a lot of variability, uncertainty, and potential disruptions in the demand and supply chains. And all of these factors highlight the importance of logistics and supply chain management in this context, and also in particular for us to think about in conjunction health systems, humanitarian systems, logistics, supply chain. Probably all of these have been highlighted, and the interplay between them more than ever this year as we face the COVID-19 pandemic. So in light of these grand challenges, this conference provides an open forum to discuss new solutions in health systems, disaster preparedness and response, and also long-term development. So again, 2020 has been a very challenging year. We are very, very glad to have you with us today, representing various organizations from all around the world. And it's wonderful to get together, even if only virtually this year, to share our learnings, experiences, best practices, research findings, and to support each other, hopefully leading us towards a better future. So before I continue with our welcome, let me introduce our other conference co-chairs. You see Julie on the video here. If others are here, I'm not sure. Özlem, George, Jared, and Luke, feel free to unmute your video anytime as we do our opening, and then wave hello to our participants. So we've been on this conference journey together with the co-chairs for many years, and it's been a wonderful team effort. And of course, I also would like to acknowledge the contributions and support of our amazing conference program committee. Again, many of them have worked with us not only this year, but over the years, and their commitment and hard work deserves much, much credit for the wonderful set of speakers, attendees, and topics we are able to bring together at the conference. So I see Luke there. Hi, Luke. Good morning or good afternoon. All right. So now you probably see the poll. I see the poll results. You are attending the conference for a variety of reasons, probably all of the above. But I see many of you would like to explore ideas, gain knowledge, and as well as making new contacts, meeting new people, and sharing your own experiences. That sounds fantastic. So the conference, of course, could not have been possible without the generous sponsorship from our key partners. UPS Foundation has been a premier sponsor every year since the very early beginnings of this conference, and we are grateful to them for their continuing support. We are also very pleased to have UPS Foundation President Ed Martinez, who will join us shortly in our opening panel session this morning. And we are also grateful to Chemonics for their strong support of the conference since 2016. It's been a pleasure working with them, and we are also grateful to them for their strong participation at the conference. So please join me with a big applause. I'm going to do this on behalf of all of us for thanking our sponsors, especially during this very, very challenging year. We couldn't have done this without their support. So now I am going to turn it over to my colleague Julie Swan and conference co-chair. She will share a brief history of the conference and also provide an overview of our agenda. But before I do so, let me say a big, big, big thank you to our incredible team at Georgia Tech for pulling this together. We have a formal thank you slide coming up later, but I want to say it now, and probably you'll hear me say this multiple times. An online event seems easy when you participate as an attendee, but I know how many countless hours, day and night, they spent putting this together. So I am really, really grateful to them. And you know, if we have some glitches here and there, this is the first time we are doing this conference virtually. So please forgive us. We are here and they are here to support anything along the way. But I just want to say a big thank you, and we'll come back with a formal thank you in just a little bit. So with that, Julie, you're on.
Thank you very much, Pinar. And I'll be taking over and sharing my screen in just a moment. And for those of you who don't use Zoom a lot, you do have some capability of controlling it from your side in terms of how big you see the sharing of the screen versus other kinds of things. So you can try out those different settings. And I'll be sharing my screen now, and you should be able to see that. I am delighted to be with you here today, and I hope you'll participate in this next poll. From what part of the world are you joining now? And we've given you several different options down here, so choose the one from where you're joining right now. That might not be where you're from originally. From our past events, we certainly know that people come from all over the world, and they work in all parts of the world as well. So, fill out that poll, and we'll share those results in just a moment. This conference has had such an exciting pathway and such an interesting journey. It began in 2009 in Atlanta, Georgia, started by Georgia Tech. And after 3 years in Atlanta, we collaborated with Luke and others to host the conference in Germany in 2012, and expanded that collaboration with Jared and others, and moved to Malaysia in 2013. From there, we've been to Mexico, South Africa, Denmark, back to Atlanta, Dubai, Rwanda, and now this year, virtual. This is our first time hosting the conference virtually, but we have more registered attendees than we have ever had. So we're looking at this as an opportunity to use this, in some sense, what is a natural experiment, because we need to do it because of what's going on in the world. But it also allows us to see if this innovation can help us reach more people from around the world, while still giving people the valuable things that they get out of the conference. This is our agenda for today. We'll have, not just for today, but for the whole conference. So we'll have 3 keynotes. We have 3 plenary panels that each have multiple speakers on them. We've got workshops that are set up to be interactive, even in this virtual format. We have oral presentations where you can also join and ask questions of the presenters. And there are poster sessions and breakouts throughout the conference. So you can see how to join these from the attendee login website that you can get to from the HHL website. And so we encourage you to explore these different opportunities and join in different sessions during the event. There are also many opportunities to engage with other participants over the Slack electronic channel. So this is a way, it does not replace our interactions in person completely, but it does allow us to talk about different ideas, share findings, get to know each other a little bit. So please log into Slack and try it out. So we have registered well, let me go ahead and tell you about the poll results that we have so far. So we have 44% joining from Europe, 48% from North America, and a number of people joining from Asia and Africa as well. And I do expect that this will change over different parts, different time periods of the conference as people maybe come off work and then join the conference, and they're on different time zones. Maybe some of them are even sleeping right now, who knows. Overall, we have more than 280 registered attendees representing more than 40 countries across 200 different organizations. So that network is really valuable. That village of health and humanitarian practitioners around the world is really valuable, and I encourage you to engage with them. Just a moment, there we go. Special thanks go out to the staff that have made this possible, and I'm going to give my round of applause, and I encourage you to give yours in various ways, whether it's a round of applause in the actual meeting, or by sending them a note, or by thanking them in the Slack channel. In particular, Jocelyn Rodriguez has been the conference director, and without her, this event would not have been a manager, a critical one throughout this whole process of the planning and execution of the conference. Special thanks to Andy Halablian for the website development, which is great and has been a real bonus and necessary for the conference. There's also a set of students who've been supporting the event, so let me also give thanks to those students: Abigail Chambliss, Zarambinta Diallo, Mihir Kandarpa, Taylor Carta, Akane Fujimoto, Yarv Cohen. Thank you, students, for all that you have done in supporting this when you may also have been going through disruptive times where you are. Thank you to all of the staff and the folks who have been supporting this event. We appreciate it. And of course, as I mentioned, special thanks to Jocelyn and Hannah for their work, and they have been supporting the event across the entire spectrum of activities. Thank you, Jocelyn and Hannah, for all that you've done. So today we have a little bit of an introduction to the conference, and we'll begin our keynote address in a few minutes. And then after that, we have a poster session coffee break. So if you'll go back into the website, you'll see the opportunity to join the poster sessions, and you can virtually visit with those attendees and look at what they have done. And then we will have presentations and workshops at 11:15. There are a couple of different tracks of those, so you can make some choices on what is of interest to you. And then we'll again have a poster session, and at the end of the day, we'll wrap this up with a fantastic plenary panel. So I hope you'll join us throughout the day as you're able to. And we are also recording these sessions to make them available after. Now, if you've been to one of these conferences before, you know that I often give you homework. I give you that homework at the beginning of the conference so that you'll be prepared for it, and you can do it throughout the conference. I ask you some questions, and I encourage you to think about these throughout the event. So one of those questions is what knowledge you can take away both for yourself and your colleagues who are not able to attend today. And, you know, in that initial poll, many of you said that you were joining for the purposes of gaining new knowledge. So this is great. And I, as a professor, I encourage you to take notes on this. I do believe that many of us learn by writing, and this will also, you'll see so much and you'll have so much information over the next few days that this will help you remember it and take it back to others who can't be here. And it's not just about knowledge. What we really want to see is continued improvement across the systems, transformation across the systems. And for that, we have to take action. So I also encourage you to think about what action will you take when you finish this conference. And you don't have to wait till it finishes, of course. You can take actions even on that first day. But what actions will you take? What difference can you make based on what you have learned? This might be little things such as interacting with a new colleague and engaging on LinkedIn or Slack or some other opportunity. It can be bigger and thinking about maybe how you do procurement or how you think about transportation, or even bigger than that, a strategic partner that you've identified to work with for the future. There can be lots of different kinds of actions. And finally, what action will you take others to take when you return? Because you're not the only decision maker. So you may be able to advocate for other actions across your organization and across the industry. And take note of some of these things, because we may have opportunities to ask you to share some of these throughout the conference and at the end of it through Slack, through Zoom polls, and other kinds of ways. And with that, I am going to turn it back to my colleague, Pinar, who will take us to the next stage of the conference. Thank you for joining us, attendees.
All right, I hope everybody can see my screen. So it's now my honor and pleasure to introduce Ed Martinez, who is our first keynote speaker at this year's conference. Joining Ed in a fireside chat is Michelle Nunn, who was a keynote speaker at one of our previous conferences, and it's so wonderful to have her back today with us. Ed is the president of UPS Foundation, which leads the global citizenship programs and initiatives for UPS. He's responsible from the various operations of the foundation around the globe, and also serves as the UPS Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Before his current position, he served as the Director of Philanthropy and Corporate Relations for the UPS Foundation, and before that as Corporate Legal Counsel in the UPS Legal Department. In addition to his responsibilities at UPS, he is also very active in various service and leadership roles in other organizations. I won't list them all, but they include the World Academic Forum, UN Global Logistics Cluster, UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UN OCHA, the Global Humanitarian Action Executive Council, and the National Academy of Sciences Resilient America Program. And he also serves as a member of the World Food Program USA Board of Directors. So we are very, very pleased to have Ed Martinez joining us as a keynote speaker this morning. And like I said, joining Ed in a fireside chat is Michelle Nunn. She's the president and CEO of CARE USA. CARE, I'm sure as many of you know, is a leading humanitarian organization that fights global poverty and provides life-saving assistance in emergencies, with work in 100 countries, reaching nearly 70 million people this past year. And maybe Michelle will correct me on these numbers. It may have expanded since I prepared the intro. Michelle Nunn has set very ambitious goals for CARE and put them into action, with the goal of reaching 200 million of the world's most vulnerable people. CARE invested in innovative new programs and partnerships with private corporations and also other nonprofits. And before joining CARE, Michelle's successful career spanned civic and public service, leadership and social entrepreneurship, including her leadership in Hands-on Atlanta and later Points of Light, with affiliates across the globe, engaging in more than 7,000 corporations and nonprofit organizations. So we are again very, very pleased to have Ed Martinez and Michelle Nunn, and please join me in welcoming them to our 12th annual conference.
Thanks so much, Pinar. Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you all, and to once again join this terrific assemblage with HHL and the terrific co-chairs Pinar and Julie and the many people that have been recognized. And it is a special privilege to be able to interview and learn from and pretend like we're sitting at the fireside for a fireside chat with Ed Martinez. And so, Ed, I do want to start by saying I believe that it's now public information and well documented that you are making a transition after 44 years at UPS and passing the mantle. So as I was thinking about that, I was just thinking, like, there is nobody better to gain wisdom from, to gain inspiration from, and to get insights around action than Ed Martinez.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And, before we get started, I got to say, it's truly an honor for me to be here with you at this conference. And I want to just thank, a heartfelt thank you to Pinar and to Julie and to all the partners that have made this conference so successful and really so important, particularly this year, because we are at a very serious moment in our history, certainly in our generation, and partners like Luke from NCIAD, who we've worked with for many years. I like to think that what I say and how we talk about the work of UPS and our other partners, that I speak really on behalf of a collective community that is on this call today. There are many partners that work together, including, of course, CARE and Michelle. You are a personal friend and a really important partner of UPS. But there are many partners on this call, and I like to say that what I say and the examples that I use really represent this entire community. Great companies that are doing great work all around the world, and in many ways like what UPS is doing, and with UPS side by side. So it truly is an honor. I want to thank all the staff, the students of Georgia Tech, for your resilience in putting on this great conference all over the world. It really takes a global community to confront the challenges that we're seeing today.
Yeah. Well, Ed, you have distinguished yourself as both a leader. I think UPS has distinguished themselves as a humanitarian leader, a corporate citizen, and so we're really fortunate. I know, as you said, that CARE, for instance, which has a 75-year history in responding to emergencies, but also long-term development, has considered UPS to be one of the very foremost partners and one of the most important leaders in this sector. So let's jump in and let's talk about, as you said, we're facing an extraordinary moment. Even an organization like CARE and an organization like UPS probably did not feel ready to face a global pandemic when we did, and when we started to sort of roll up our sleeves in March. Can you just take us through and talk a little bit about how UPS has met this moment, how you've responded globally, locally, how you partnered? Would think it would be really helpful to just get a picture of that.
Sure. And I think, Michelle, weaved in what you just said is a very important point, in that we just can't wait until crisis like this happens. And so I'd like to take everyone back to the outbreak in West Africa in 2014, because that's when we started doing a lot of work really around preparedness. And at the outset and at the outbreak of the West African Ebola crisis, and when we got through that, there was several groups that came together and created these pandemic preparedness coalitions. The Global Health Security Agenda created the Private Sector Roundtable. The World Economic Forum created several coalitions around pandemic preparedness. And one of the most impactful one came out of a coalition that was built by the World Food Program and the World Health Organization. And we called ourselves the Global Health Security Agenda Supply Chain Working Group. And 30 institutions, and I must recognize one of the instrumental founders of that coalition was Stanley Bergman from Henry Schein, the biggest medical equipment supply chain distribution company in the world, and dental supply chain. And we all came together and we brought along many private sector companies, many of the pharmaceuticals, Pfizer, BD came along, competitors. And we put this group together and we began to brainstorm how can we better prepare for the next pandemic, knowing that it was only a matter of time. And a lot of the work that we did in that group probably, and we know now, could have never prepared us for what we're confronting here. Because a lot of that, as you can imagine, has to do with, okay, pre-positioning vaccines, but if you don't know what's coming at you, how can you have a vaccine already prepared? But one of the most important points that came out, and I think that's why this conference is so important, is relationships and partnerships and trust. Because when you talk about bringing together the public-private sector and building these strong partnerships, it really comes down to building that trust among the different industries, among civil society organizations. And so we had those relationships. We had pre-positioned, let's say, supply chain networking information that really allowed us to better respond to COVID. When it first began, I mean, I know you mentioned March, but as soon as it began in China, the UPS Foundation mobilized our international partners, our UN partners. We mobilized with you, and we actually began building capacity and shipping PPE equipment into China in early January with our UN partners. And just like everything else, there's no silver bullet to a crisis. And so we mobilize various components of what we call our Humanitarian Relief and Resilience Program. So we mobilized with our UN partners, we mobilized with CARE, all of our international organizations to help outside of the United States. We also mobilized here in the United States and in local communities around the world. And I'll pause there for a moment just to give you a little bit of background on how we're structured as a leading global citizenship for UPS. The foundation distributes funding, philanthropic dollars, to all of our business units around the world. We support about 4,000 organizations at the local level and at the global level each year. So when we mobilized to help communities that were impacted by COVID, we already, again, had these partnerships on the ground that enabled us to really address 4 key issues: health, employment, financial sustainability, and food security. And that's what we saw was impacting all of these communities around the world. And we, in fact, of course, made a financial commitment of about $21 million. And to date, our folks in the field have supported about 1,300 organizations across these 4 pillars that we know were so important for the communities that are still undergoing a dramatic impact by COVID.
So, Ed, I mean, you all, I think, were at the very forefront of preparedness. And as you say, it's interesting because you noted that it's not only about the logistics of it, but it's also about the relationships piece of it. And you sort of paired those things, which I think is an important takeaway, right? That it's not just the abstract and the intellectual piece, it is having those relationships and for instance, UPS was the very first funder of CARE's response work as we recognized the true global nature of this. And I think it's interesting that for CARE, almost half of our COVID response in the first and early months came from corporate partners versus institutions and governments, which is a little bit counterintuitive. And so maybe just to amplify your perspective on how the corporate community has responded at large, and how those, maybe some of those previous alliances with, as you say, both competitors and collaborators has helped support the broader response that UPS has been able to deploy.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that, as I said at the outset, companies are doing an incredible job, really playing to their strengths. And I'll come back to Henry Schein. And Henry Schein has been instrumental in obtaining PPEs from really all over the world. And so I would say that companies that don't have a particular expertise have made incredible contributions of volunteers, of financial commitments, and have been working through organizations like the World Economic Forum that created what they call an action platform. And so you have a lot of different industries contributing intellectual property. I will tell you that we are now working on what we call a humanitarian dashboard that is going to allow the humanitarian community to be able to look at supply chains all over the world when a crisis like this occurs. And even as we speak, organizations like Google and Deloitte and many of the consultancies are helping build this dashboard. So I see it happening. I would say to any private sector company, always play to your strengths, leverage your people. I can't say enough about UPSers all over the world, because when we talk about UPS being an essential business, UPSers have been out there all the way through this crisis. Very courageous team of people that care about their communities and are out there helping all of us every day.
Well, and I've certainly seen that firsthand. It's not only the financial capital, probably more importantly, or as important, is the intellectual capital, the human capital that the companies can deploy. So Ed, you talked about these sort of multifaceted ways that you all are responding. It's not just health, it's also employment, it's also the financial sustainability capacity for people to get through this crisis, it's food security. We just did a report with over 6,000 women telling us from around the world what is it that they're facing, and what they're listing is obviously the health concerns, but it's also food and employment and mental health issues as well, with the stress and anxiety and the many dimensions of this. You all have been working on all of those. Can you also just talk a little bit about how you're thinking about this? In many emergencies, you build up, you have a lot of adrenaline, and over a period of weeks you address, and then there's the long-term rebuild. But we are in the midst of a crisis and a humanitarian emergency that we don't really see an end to right now. So how is UPS thinking about this from a continuity perspective? How are you preparing, for instance, for vaccination deployment?
Right. Well, before I do that, Michelle, I just want to say publicly how thankful I am for your leadership and for CARE's leadership, really being at the forefront for women and young girls. And you've heard me say this before, but I think that women are the cornerstone of our community, and they are the bedrock, right? And when something occurs around natural disasters, around conflict and famine, economic depressions, women carry the load for their families, for their neighbors, and then for their communities. So I just want to, recognize what CARE has been doing in over 61 countries, helping women help their families and their communities through this incredible crisis. So thank you, Michelle and CARE. We have been working not only on COVID, but also we've had hurricanes that have hit the U.S. We've had fires on the West Coast. We are monitoring all sorts of international crisis. And for those that may not know it, Ebola is still alive in Africa. And in fact, we did work with the World Food Program into Africa with some supplies just last week. So we are in a critical time, and UPS can't do it alone, right? And that's why we're here at this conference talking about how we can work more together. But we are definitely continuing to work with all of our partners in being involved in as many crises as possible. So putting a pin on that for a moment, and let's discuss how the world is going to confront the potential and hopeful vaccine that will come about. I was having some conversations with partners the other day about this, and the world vaccinates about 400 million people a year, just overall, malaria, HIV. And so what the world is seeking to undertake now really is to vaccinate literally billions of people as soon as possible. So it is an incredible task to do that. UPS, our company, is in part of the Warp Speed team with the administration that is now thinking through how we are going to help distribute. But it's not going to just be UPS. Everyone's going to have to participate at the community level, at the global level. Everyone's have to come together to make sure that the vaccines not only get to first world economies, but more importantly, get to those that always carry the biggest burden during a disaster, right? It's the poor, it's the underserved countries, it's the middle income countries and the low income countries that are really going to have to not only await the vaccine, but also deal with the natural supply chain challenges that we see. In many parts of the world, you have poor infrastructure. You have rain out of pathways and roads. And so not only are we going to have to deal with making sure that the vaccine gets distributed to billions of people as quickly as possible, but we're going to also have to overcome the natural challenges that even exist today. So we are very active, again, with governments, with our partners like you and CARE, and to understand how we can best get us over this next challenge of distributing the vaccine, more importantly than anything else, in a very equitable fashion.
Are you hopeful about the kind of coordination that's happening to ensure that equitable distribution? Because I know that is a major concern, and as you say, it's often those who are most vulnerable that may be last in line for those for that vaccination. So I wonder, given your perspective, if you feel like we're doing the right things as a global community to ensure that we do distribute equitably.
Well, I will tell you that I am very impressed by the financial commitments that have been made by member countries. I'm very hopeful that institutions like Gavi, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Global Fund, UNICEF, we are talking, these are all our partners, we are talking to all of these institutions, to CARE, of course, and I see a lot of focus for months now on this challenge. I think if I were to say what keeps me up at night really is dealing with those natural challenges that we have today, right? You and I have talked about many times about that last mile delivery. Well, that's not going to change. We're going to have those challenges with the distribution of this vaccine. And so, if anything, those challenges are going to be the ones that really, I think, going to challenge us. On the flip side, I think that what this process will do is it will create a lot more focus on that last mile. And so I think that the silver lining is we could pave the way to improve public health systems, to improve that last mile through this incredible adventure and endeavor that we're going to be undertaking.
I think that's the hope, is that as we rebuild, that we can actually rebuild more equitably and build the kind of health infrastructure that is needed over the longer term. So Ed, you all have been kind of at the forefront of a lot of innovation, and also, some of the back end work. For instance, you've worked with CARE on our supply chain, humanitarian logistics. You've piloted literally drones in Rwanda. You've created networks in Uganda. Can you talk a little bit about how UPS is sort of embracing innovation and new ways of operating to meet some of those last mile challenges?
Sure. I will tell you, Michelle, we've worked with you and CARE for over 30 years. It's been a journey for us, for the UPS Foundation and UPS, and really, I will tell, and I want to recognize Joe Ruiz, who's probably listening. He is our director of our program, and he has done an incredible job, and also Alice Turner, who works with us. But when we started out this journey, it was really about response. It was really about, getting there in time once a disaster occurred, and we took our program and we expanded it, right? We knew the benefits of preparedness. They say that preparedness is a down payment on your response and a discount on your recovery, right? And that's so true, right? And then when we saw the work that supply chains can do for people, for communities, and what we call in peacetime, when we didn't have a major crisis going on, we then looked at how important public health systems were to the health of communities. And that's what started moving us in the area of strengthening public health system. And I'm a firm believer, and I've said this many times, that in just about any context, if you have a resilient and an efficient supply chain, you're going to help save lives. You are going to help improve the quality of life in communities, because we know that supply chain and trade brings prosperity, brings innovations, ideas, brings really people together. And so that's what really got us so focused on healthcare supply chains, and in looking at always lifting our communities. We focused in those parts of the world where supply chains were inefficient, supply chains were broken, and that's the convergence, right? And as a corporate citizen, and many corporations look at this, you're always looking for that shared value, right? Where a company can bring its expertise and the volunteer spirit of its people and help communities. And so that's where our convergence has been. It's been around strengthening supply chains really all over the world, and where they're most needed in underserved communities. And so working with partners that were in those communities, right? Working with CARE, working with Gavi, working with the Global Fund, and working with our UN partners, that's where these ideas began to surface. And great partners, one of our great partners is Zipline, a drone manufacturer, drone operator, that really was the cornerstone of our partnership when we launched the Medical Drone Network partnership in Rwanda with Gavi, and Gavi and Zipline was the anchor, and of course President Kagame was the visionary, because when you're flying drones, it's the government that is a key actor in making sure that you take a chance. And so when we launched that partnership in Rwanda, very successful. Drones, Zipline drones are now covering the entire country. Early last year, we again ventured and Zipline started a program in Ghana where Gavi and UPS Foundation came together in that partnership. So, we always believe that technology and innovation are going to be able to have that multiplier effect for us. But never underestimate the power of the human spirit. And so that's why we bring our UPSers along with us in anything that we do. And we continue, particularly in a crisis like this one, that we're going to have to find more innovations. And I believe, when we talk about the distribution challenges of the vaccine, I sincerely believe that we are going to have some breakthrough innovation to make sure that everyone on the planet gets vaccinated. And so I think that this is going to be, this event is a step change for us, and it's going to bring about even more innovation.
I hope that's right. And I do think it is also, as you said, bringing out the, in some instances, really the best of the human spirit. One of the things CARE is seeing is that many of our group savings of women around the world, some of the poorest women in a country are actually taking their savings and they are helping and supporting and creating care packages for those who are begging, for instance, as they in their communities, or are less able to provide for themselves. So the spirit of human resiliency and innovation is really strong. So Ed, I want to open up for a couple of questions that are coming in from the audience, and I'm going to read these in the interest of time. So the first one is from Roberto, who says that the next phase of COVID will be to transport 2 billion doses of vaccination through COVAX. The private market will also transport additional quantities. Any insights on how logistics will be impacted and how to prepare ourselves? I know it's one of the things that you alluded to that you all have been thinking about and working together on.
Well, I think one of the major challenges right now is the temperature of the vaccine itself, right? How it's going to be transported. In many believe it's going to have to be transported frozen. So you're going to have that cold chain all the way to that last mile, and so that to me is one of the key unknowns right now that we're trying to solve for. I do believe, as was pointed out in the question, that and I stated earlier, it's going to be an incredible supply chain challenge. I think we've got great networks around the world, and I think it's going to really boil down to that last mile. And it's a challenge today, and I think that it's going to be a challenge for the vaccine distribution. But I think that we're going to solve for that. I think we are, and we didn't get a chance to talk about a project that we did with Gavi, that we're still doing with Gavi in Uganda, and where we were able to introduce cold chain into Uganda and improve the supply chain, reduce stockouts by about 80% in health clinics. So that to me is an example of what can be done when you work together with great partners, when you work together with sort of a visionary health minister that we have in Uganda. But I think that it will be a collective effort. You will have companies in the logistics and supply chain industry from all over the world working together to make sure that we get the vaccines to our beneficiaries.
And to build upon that, there's a couple of questions around, and it's sort of, I think it ties to your idea that we may see innovations that go on to serve us over the long term. So tying together, there's a question around what we think cold storage will look like, and also how do you see these supply chain roles changing in the long term as a result?
Great questions. We are building freezer farms in Europe, here in the United States. So I think that cold storage is going to continue to evolve. I think there's a lot of great technology out there, and certainly UPS is really at the forefront of that. But I do think again, cold chain doesn't exist in some countries. So I think that making that introduction for this vaccine is going to be a breakthrough for other vaccines and for the health of these communities. I think that the role of the logistician is going to change because, and I've seen it change. I think the logistician, and we call ourselves loggies, right? The loggies has become almost like a relationship broker, because I think that over the years, we've learned that, civil society has been welcoming of the private sector. The private sector has been welcoming of civil society, and at the cornerstone of this supply chain is the logisticians. And I think that I see that role as being a role of a knowledge broker, of a relationship builder, and bringing their expertise, her expertise, to the forefront to improve the health of our communities.
One of the questions coming in from George is about localization. We know this is a big topic in the humanitarian realm, is how do we build the most resilient, locally adept at responding to emergencies capacities. And so that means investing in local organizations, which often are disintermediated by governments or big international organizations. I wonder how UPS thinks about this, and especially how we build the capacities of local organizations and use moments like this to do so.
Started that question, the first thing that popped in my mind was results. And I will tell you that, for companies like UPS, right? So, we operate in over 220 countries and territories. We have over 500,000 employees, and there are many companies like us. One of the things that we do in a community is we strengthen the relationships between government, civil society, and the private sector. And I think that in any community, whether you're in Kigali or you're in Atlanta, if you bring together those institutions and you show that you can deliver results for the community, those institutions, those partnerships will be lifted. And I've seen it. Believe me, I've seen it. I've seen communities work in silos and problems go unaddressed for decades. And I've seen communities where those three institutions come together and miracles happen in terms of health, financial status of these communities, and I'm talking communities all around the world. So I do believe that we will strengthen the capacity of local institutions if we can bring those institutions together in a collective effort.
It's so powerful. So, Ed, I'm going to ask you to do the impossible, which is in 2 minutes. I'm going to, there's a question about drone deliveries and the future affordability of that. I wonder if you could address that, and if you see that as being a significant dimension of future logistical delivery at scale. And then I want to ask you one more kind of wisdom question.
Okay. Well, I don't know about wisdom, but I will tell you, we have a phenomenal group at UPS that really looks at all of our advanced technologies and automations and drones. We have, of course, now a drone airline. I will tell you that it's having an incredible impact in where we are applying it here in the United States and overseas, and we've talked about the examples in Rwanda and Ghana. I think it's an incredible innovation, and it's going to continue to evolve, and the practicality of its use, particularly in urban areas, is going to continue to be refined. But I will say that drones is only one part of a huge supply chain, which takes multimodal capabilities, whether by sea, by air, by land, different types of vehicles that are used. And so when you look at supply chain solutions, drones is only one piece of a very, very large process that has to continue to be a very vital lifeline all over the world. And I think that as I go into a community, we're looking at the large supply chain challenges, and drones is a very important component. It will continue to evolve, but I will tell you, there's many opportunities just in working with the existing supply chain.
Terrific. And so I'm going to ask you to do the truly impossible, which is to take some of your wisdom over the last 44 years and just put it into a call to action or a bit of wisdom for this group in just 1 minute or less.
Well, I'd say number one, I will tell you, number one, again, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to Georgia Tech and Pinar and all the participants. Luke, my good partner from NCIAD, just thanks for this opportunity and to continue doing what you're doing. I think any institution, whether you're in the private sector, civil society, or in government, you have to be able to play to your strength, particularly in the private sector. Play to your strength, bring that to the table. Number two, I think that you have to understand that you need to build trust and you need to have a collective effort. No one institution can do it alone. So one of the things that I spend my time on today, and I will in the future, is trying to foster more of those relationships among these institutions. And then lastly, never underestimate the human spirit. And each institution has to give due respect to their people, to their employees, to their citizens, and to their communities, to know that it all happens there in the human heart. And if we can have trust in each other, we're definitely going to be able to move this world forward.
And thanks for your extraordinary leadership and reminding us that we have the opportunity to build on strength and trust and the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit. And you're a perfect exemplar of that. Thank you. And I'll pass it back to Pinar.
Thank you very much, Ed and Michelle. This was fantastic. And I will reiterate the importance of playing to our strengths, collaborating, building trust, and caring for each other and supporting each other. Very important at all times, but especially now as we go through these very, very challenging times. So, and everyone, please join me in thanking Ed and Michelle for this wonderful opening keynote session and for sharing these insights. So we are going to transition now to our next session. I'll turn it over to Jocelyn. But before I do so, I want to remind everyone that we have Slack channels and our time in the sessions is limited, but we can certainly and hope to continue the discussions and engagements in the Slack channels.